Welcome to the Deep Dive. We've got some pretty wild stuff to unpack today, folks. UFOs, government secrets, maybe even alien tech. Our main source. A YouTube video, believe it or not, this woman, Ivona, claims she can tap into, get this, the etheric realm through some kind of guided trance. Pretty far out there, right? But that's what we do here. We dive deep, see if we can separate fact from fiction, or at least find something interesting.
Definitely a unique challenge examining a source like this. It's not exactly your typical scientific study. I'm curious to see where this leads us.
Yeah, me too. Let's jump right in. Ivona starts off saying UFO sightings have been hush-hush, deliberately hidden, until just recently, and she even mentions a secret report, June 21st, 2021, where the U.S. Armed Forces supposedly classified UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, which is interesting because that same year, the Pentagon did release a UAP report.
Yeah, and it was a big deal, not just some internal document. It was a public acknowledgement that these unexplained sightings exist. But there's this tension, right? The official story is we don't have enough evidence. But Ivona's claiming a cover-up, which plays into that whole debate about government transparency and are they hiding something when it comes to UFOs?
Totally. Okay, so then Ivona gets into describing different types of UFOs. Some sound familiar, like the classic dark-colored saucers with those round capsules underneath, but then she throws in some curveballs, like invisible square platforms high above the Earth. And she even describes seeing humans on these platforms, dressed in suits, like regular office workers.
Those saucers, they're pretty common in UFO reports in pop culture. But invisible platforms, that's where things get tricky. I mean, to make something that big completely invisible, you'd need technology way beyond anything we have. We're talking bending light, manipulating electromagnetic fields. It's more science fiction than science fact at this point.
It's almost like she's describing some kind of interdimensional commute, with humans going to work on these invisible platforms. If they're even real, what are they doing up there? Are they there by choice?
Ivona implies they're not exactly in control of the situation, which raises all sorts of ethical questions about consent and exploitation.
It gets even wilder. She claims different alien species are operating these crafts, including those infamous grays. But here's the kicker. She says some everyday human tech, like the internet and 5G, are actually alien in origin, given to us in exchange for something. She doesn't really specify what, though.
Alien tech being gifted to humans, that's a classic sci-fi trope, but it doesn't really line up with how we understand technological innovation. I mean, we can trace the development of the internet and 5G through decades of research, experiments, human scientists and engineers working together.
So you're saying it's more likely human ingenuity than alien intervention?
It's possible we've been influenced by ideas we don't fully grasp, but to say these specific technologies are purely extraterrestrial, that's a pretty big leap.
Okay, let's talk about this etheric investigation protocol Ivona uses. To get this information, it's described as a guided trance. But what does that even mean? And how reliable is it compared to, traditional research or scientific methods?
It's similar to hypnosis, which has been used in different fields. But the scientific community is kind of split on how valid the info is. There's always the potential for bias, suggestibility, even just making stuff up.
So right off the bat, we're dealing with a source that's pretty subjective and maybe open to interpretation.
Exactly, which is why we got to approach Ivona's claims with some healthy skepticism. Maybe what she's describing is a mix of personal experiences, cultural influences, subconscious stuff, rather than a direct line to this etheric realm.
So while her story is definitely captivating, we can't just take it at face value. We got to look at it from all angles.
Absolutely, and that's what makes this deep dive so compelling. It's not about blindly accepting or rejecting everything. It's about engaging with the material, considering different perspectives, and ultimately coming to our own conclusions based on the evidence.
Speaking of evidence, let's dive into some of the specifics Ivona gives about UFO sightings. She claims Russia and the U.S. are major players in the UFO scene, with extraterrestrials influencing world leaders, especially in Russia.
From a geopolitical standpoint, it's interesting to think why these two superpowers would be so central to the UFO narrative. They both have a history of space exploration and military development, which leads to speculation about advanced tech and potential cover-ups.
Plus, you can't forget the whole Cold War rivalry thing. That definitely adds fuel to the fire, suspicions about hidden agendas and secret programs.
Right. The Cold War created this atmosphere of secrecy and paranoia. That still lingers today, makes it easy to believe stories about government cover-ups and shadowy figures pulling the strings.
But even if we ignore the conspiracy theories, there's still the question of why some countries seem to be at the forefront of the UFO phenomenon. Is it just because they have better surveillance systems? Or there's something else going on that we don't know about. It's a real puzzle.
It really is, and to solve it, we need to go deeper than just the surface claims. We need to look at the historical context, the geopolitical motivations, and how disinformation might be clouding our understanding of these events.
Okay, we've covered a lot already. We've got this unique source material, Ivona's account of her etheric investigation, and her claims about UFOs, alien technology, and maybe even government involvement.
But we've just scratched the surface.
Exactly. We still need to explore some of the more specific details of Ivona's story, like those invisible platforms, the supposed human-alien collaboration, and her vision of the future. We'll pick up right where we left off in part 2 of our deep dive.
Okay, so those invisible platforms, they're definitely one of the most puzzling parts of Ivona's story. I mean, a solid structure, big enough to hold people, but completely invisible. That really challenges our understanding of physics.
Yeah, it makes you think, what else are we missing? What's happening right under our noses that we just can't see? Kind of creepy, right? Ivona even describes them as being square and made of something like clouds.
That's a really strange detail. If we try to make sense of it scientifically, it would mean they've mastered material science and light manipulation on a whole other level, way beyond anything we can even imagine. We're talking about controlling matter at the subatomic level, changing how it interacts with light, maybe even gravity.
It's mind-blowing when you really stop and think about it. And she sees humans on these platforms just dressed in suits, going about their day. It adds this weird layer of normalcy to something so out there.
Exactly, like it's some kind of interdimensional office building. People commuting to work on invisible platforms. What kind of work could they be doing that requires that level of secrecy and tech?
Ivona suggests these humans aren't exactly volunteers. They're under the control of these extraterrestrials. Which brings us to that whole question of collaboration between humans and aliens.
Yeah, that idea of collaboration comes up a lot in UFO stories. And it often has a sinister undertone, like governments making deals with extraterrestrials, trading away human freedom or resources for advanced technology. It taps into that fear of control, hidden agendas, stuff like that.
Right, like making a deal with the devil, where the short-term gain could have really bad consequences in the long run.
Exactly, and it's worth noting that Ivona specifically links this collaboration to Russia, saying extraterrestrials have a strong influence over their leaders. That kind of claim pops up a lot in these discussions, and it often reflects existing tensions and distrust between countries.
But even if we put aside the conspiracy theories for a second, why do countries like Russia and the U.S. always seem to be in the spotlight? When it comes to UFOs, I mean...
That's a good point. It's probably a few things. For one, they've both been leaders in space exploration and military technology for a long time. So it's natural that people would speculate about them having advanced capabilities and maybe even encounters with the unknown.
And the media plays a role too, right? Those countries, especially the U.S., have a history of UFO sightings and pop culture references that keep the topic in everyone's mind.
Absolutely. Media coverage shapes public perception in a big way. And with UFOs, it's often a mix of genuine curiosity, sensationalism, and that desire to believe in something extraordinary.
Speaking of extraordinary, we have to talk about Ivona's claim that some of our technology, like the internet and 5G, are actually gifts from aliens. I know we touched on this before, but it's worth digging into a bit more. How do we square that with what we know about how technology develops?
It's a tough one. On the one hand, you have the incredible complexity and rapid advancement of human tech, which some people might see as evidence of outside influence. But then we have a really clear, well-documented history of human innovation, driven by scientific research, experimentation, and people working together. To say these groundbreaking technologies were just handed to us by aliens, it kind of ignores the amazing work of countless people over generations.
Like, we're not smart enough to do it ourselves.
Exactly, and it's something to think about when we hear claims like this. It's important to be open-minded, but also to acknowledge the ingenuity and resilience of humans,
Well said. Okay, I know we're supposed to avoid getting into ethics, but this next part kind of forces us to. Ivona says these gifts, these technologies, came at a price. She implies that humans are being manipulated or controlled by these extraterrestrials.
Right, that touches on a very basic fear. Losing control, being a pawn in some bigger game we don't understand. It's a theme that runs through human history, from ancient myths to modern conspiracy theories.
And science fiction loves that theme. Aliens coming to Earth with hidden agendas,
Exactly, the alien invasion trope. Advanced aliens wanting to conquer or enslave humanity.
But there are also stories about, like, positive relationships
Yeah.
between humans and aliens, where both benefit from sharing knowledge and stuff.
True, and that's what makes this whole topic so interesting. It makes us question our place in the universe, our potential for good and bad, even the nature of intelligence and consciousness.
It reminds us that we're still learning and growing, as individuals and as a species. As we explore the universe, we're going to face things that challenge our understanding of reality and our place in it.
It's a journey of exploration and discovery, and we're all in it together.
Okay, we've talked about the invisible platforms, the human-alien collaboration thing, and the possibility of being controlled. But there's one more piece of Ivona's story we need to unpack. Her vision of the future.
Ah, yes, a future where UFOs aren't just speculation, but a part of everyday life.
Let's dive into that in part 3 of our deep dive. So we've gone pretty deep into Ivona's story so far. Invisible platforms, humans working with aliens, pretty wild stuff, right? But now she takes us even further into the future.
And it's not your typical vision of the future either.
Yeah, she's talking 50 years from now. UFOs are everywhere, part of everyday life, no more hiding. Humans are working with extraterrestrials on these advanced ships. She even says we might be able to travel to other dimensions. It's a big jump from where we are today. It feels like just yesterday we were arguing about whether UAPs even existed.
It is quite a leap, and it makes you think about our own ideas of space exploration. We usually picture humans as the pioneers, boldly going where no one has gone before, driven by curiosity and the desire to discover new worlds.
But in Ivona's future, it's like we're not really in the driver's seat. We're being guided, maybe even controlled by these more advanced beings.
That's one way to look at it, and it plays into that fear of the unknown, the idea that we might not be in control of our own destiny, especially when we're dealing with something so far beyond our understanding.
But even if we're not calling the shots, she still sees humans as active participants. We're working on these incredible ships traveling to other dimensions, pushing the boundaries of what's possible, in a way.
That's true. It's not necessarily a bad future, even if it's not human-centered. There's a sense of progress, of expanding our horizons, even if we're not the ones leading the way.
But what would that kind of interaction do to us? Working side by side with beings who are so much more advanced, would we still think of ourselves as the smartest species in the universe?
It's a question that really challenges our perspective. We tend to think of humans as the center of everything, the most intelligent beings. But contact with advanced extraterrestrials could change all that. We might have to rethink our ideas about intelligence, technology, maybe even the nature of reality itself.
It's like a wake-up call, telling us to look beyond ourselves, to accept that we don't have all the answers, and to be open to the possibility that there's so much more out there than we can imagine.
That sense of wonder, of realizing how vast and mysterious the universe is, it's something we often lose sight of in our daily lives.
It's easy to get caught up in the everyday routine, to forget that there's a bigger picture out there. But stories like Ivona's, even if they're not true, they remind us that there are infinite possibilities beyond what we can see and understand.
They make us ask questions, challenge our assumptions, and approach the unknown with curiosity and a bit of humility.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into Ivona's account, what are some of the key things we've learned? We've explored her claims about UFO sightings, government secrets, alien tech, even her vision of a future where humans and extraterrestrials work together.
And we've looked at those claims from different angles, considering the science, the history, and what it all means for our place in the universe.
We've talked about the importance of critical thinking, of being careful about what information we believe, and approaching extraordinary claims with a healthy mix of skepticism and open-mindedness.
In the end, it's up to each of us to decide what resonates with us, what parts of the puzzle we choose to accept or reject, and what questions we want to keep exploring.
Ivona's story, whether it's real or just a product of her imagination, it's a powerful reminder that the universe is full of mysteries, and our understanding of it is always changing.
It's a journey of exploration and discovery, and we're all on it together.
So keep looking up, keep asking questions, and never stop exploring. That's what the deep dive is all about. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.